Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Sarah Raviani. I'm an Iranian American, and I work for National Union for Democracy in Iran. We focus on human rights and democracy in Iran. I want to tell you guys a little bit, thank you. I want to start by telling you guys a little bit about myself before I begin. So I started off as an independent human rights activist for the Iranian people in 2022. And the reason why I started advocating for Iranian human rights was because of the 2022 uprising in Iran. If you don't know what happened, it was a pivotal moment in Iranian history because the people of Iran rose up after Mahsa Amini was brutally murdered and killed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. This led to 9 months straight of protests and uprising in Iran where the youth of Iran rose up and were basically slaughtered by the IRGC. And I like to think that Iran is a very misunderstood place, but in a good way. A lot of people think that the people of Iran support the regime, but that is very far from the truth. The people of Iran, especially the youth, have turned away from supporting the regime and are absolutely nothing like the regime that's occupying Iran. Both inside and outside of Iran, the youth have risen up to speak out against the Islamic Republic, and that's where my story begins. My story as an independent activist, again, started in 2022 following the murder of Mahsa, and it started by just raising awareness. I remember I was at dinner with my parents, and my dad was like, "They murdered another girl, Sarah, and she was around your age." And I remember looking at him that night, and the look in his eyes was something I had never seen before. I grew up in a very political family. I remember from my earliest memories in 2009 during the Green Revolution in Iran when my mom was sitting in front of the TV and crying. And I didn't understand why or what was going on or why she felt the way that she felt. But as I got older and by the time the uprising in 2022 began, I was starting to understand the gravity of the situation, of what was happening and why the people were rising up. And so following that dinner with my dad, I remember before I walked out of the house that night, he said, "Sarah, come back, give me a hug and a kiss." And I remember walking up to him and giving him a hug and a kiss and just looking at that look in his eyes. And in that moment, I knew that all of us, inside and outside of Iran, were Mahsa, and all of us had been wronged by the Islamic Republic for decades. 45 years of persecution of the Iranian people, not just women, men, children, religious persecution. So many Iranians have fled Iran because the situation there is incredibly unsafe. I myself cannot travel back to Iran just because I've spoken out, and I'm speaking to you guys about the crimes against humanity that the Islamic Republic has committed against the Iranian people. And the youth of Iran deserve our voice and they deserve our support, and unfortunately that has been very much lacking. Like I said, Iran is very, very misunderstood, and especially by Western lawmakers. You'll see in the news when, the president of Iran, Raisi, just was killed, people will say, "Oh, well, look, the Iranian people are so sad that their leader was killed." But that's actually not the case. So many Iranians were celebrating and were so happy. And many of the victims of the 2022 uprising celebrated because they felt like it was retribution. And it's a confusing time to be in when you're celebrating someone's death. But when you understand what the Islamic Republic has done to the people of Iran, it begins to make a little bit of sense. So in Iran, women are second-class citizens. You have to cover your hair. They can brutalize you. They will stop you in the streets. They will pull you into vans. They will arrest you. If you are arrested, you are tortured, sexually assaulted. They face some of the most unspeakable crimes. And all the while, the Islamic Republic is waging war in the Middle East via its proxies. So while they are projecting chaos throughout the entire Middle East, they're also persecuting the people of Iran. And instead of supporting the people to overthrow the dictatorship that is occupying Iran. Our Western leadership has been marred by hyperpartisanship. Every single time there's an election, policy toward Iran changes. And we see this lack of cohesive foreign policy where it's just insufficient. Our US lawmakers don't have an Iran policy, and that's really detrimental to the people of Iran that are fighting for freedom and want freedom. That kind of plays into my role here in Washington and what we do at NUFTI. We advocate for tighter sanctions on the Islamic Republic. We also advocate for listening and hearing the voices of the Iranian people. That's something that has been lacking for the last 45 years. No one cares to listen. The Iranian people are a complete forgotten part of the equation. When they go out into the streets and they call for regime change and they call for down with the dictator, our Western politicians and media say, oh, they just want reform, or, you know, there's a presidential election that's happening in Iran and maybe things will change, but that's not the case. Until the Islamic Republic is overthrown, the Middle East will know no peace, because the Islamic Republic warmongers throughout the entire Middle East and also represses the people of Iran. So a lot of my advocacy work has been to mobilize the Iranian American diaspora. We recently just passed a bill named after Mahsa Amini, who I spoke about earlier and was brutally killed by the Islamic Republic. This bill sanctions the supreme leader and the president of Iran for human rights abuses and supporting terrorism. It's one of the very first grassroots supported pieces of legislation that was supported by the broader Iranian American diaspora. And prior to 2022, many Iranians in the diaspora, like myself, were very politically aloof and inactive. And that's, I believe, from trauma. If you're a political person inside of Iran or you participate in speaking out, you will be killed, tortured, forced to leave the country. I could name so many things that happen to people just for speaking out. So for our diaspora to mobilize for the first time in almost 45 years and finally have their voices heard and a bill passed and signed into law by the president, it was a monumental move for our community. And our diaspora is more involved than ever before in affecting change in US policy toward Iran, but it's still not enough. We really need the support of everyone to come together and say, you know, we don't want an Islamic Republic. We don't want this dictatorship ruling Iran, and it's beneficial for all of us. It's beneficial for us even here in the United States. I was talking to my colleague on the ride over, and I said, there's kidnapping plots, there's terrorist plots, there's assassination attempts that are happening here on US soil. A lot of people don't even know that. And we experience all of these things, and it's all largely ignored, and that's why we have to stand together and rise up and make our voices heard, to stand up for what's right, because human rights at the end of the day is something that's cannot be disputed. Everyone deserves the right to freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do what you want to do and be who you want to be, and that's exactly what the Iranian people want. So an overthrow of the Islamic Republic would be beneficial to all of us, not just to the people of Iran. So that's basically all I have to say, and if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer.
That was very heartwarming. You spoke without notes. You spoke like everybody. Very moving.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I would like to
Thank you.
I have two questions.
Sure.
Regime change, things of that sort, don't count on the West of the United States to do it.
Right.
It come from the country itself, from the people.
Yes.
Do you foresee that happening? Where is that in the process? And then I have a follow-up.
Sure. So like I said, 2022, I believe, was the closest we had ever come to seeing an overthrow of the Islamic Republic. We saw mostly the youth of Iran going into the streets empty-handed, and the IRGC was running from them because the people had the power. For the first time in 45 years, it was the most momentum we had ever seen. And it was largely led by the youth and by women. And unfortunately, I have a colleague who just moved from Iran, and I looked at her and I said, you know, what happened? Why did this fail? I thought we had them. And she said, Sarah, we were tired. We were in the streets for 9 months straight, and we saw no change, and we felt forgotten. And that's why everyone, you know, left the streets and stopped protesting. And when you see something that a lot of people also misunderstand is that the people inside of Iran, for the very first time, they use VPNs because the internet access is so restricted. They're for the first time seeing our lives, and they look at us, I mean us as people on the outside, Americans who live in a democracy and have freedom, and they follow everything that is being said. So for example, when the president of Iran was killed in the helicopter crash and freedom-loving Iranians were celebrating this, but then our State Department put out a memo saying, oh, we send our condolences to the people of Iran. That's very, very disappointing and discouraging, because essentially what you're doing by releasing that statement is supporting the murders of the Iranian people. So I think from long-term perspective, what we're going to see in Iran is that the youth is going to change the country. It's going to come from inside. When I talk about overthrowing the Islamic Republic, I don't mean the United States going in with boots on the ground or any Western democracy going in with boots on the ground, but the people, supporting the people by not supporting their murderers is what we have to see happen. And the people that are around my age that are going into the streets and saying we don't want an Islamic Republic, those are the people that are going to change Iran. Something that a lot of people, again, misunderstand is that Iran is a Muslim country and that everyone inside of the country supports this religious dictatorship, but that's actually not the case. The case is that the youth of Iran, they're very largely secular, and it's also one of the largest underground growing populations of Christians. No one knows this, but it's happening, and these people want to live normal lives. And I just don't see the people that are my age and the youth wanting to stay under this dictatorship. They're not going to stand for it. So eventually we will see change in Iran. It's not a matter of if, but when. And a lot of people ask me, they're like, Sarah, why are you so hopeful? How are you so hopeful? Nothing has changed for 45 years. But when I look at the kids inside of Iran that are standing up and fighting for their freedom, that's what gives me the strength in the morning to keep going. There's some days when I'm like, I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't want to go to work. It feels like nothing is changing. It feels like all my efforts are just being ignored. But the truth is that what those kids are experiencing is just very, like what I'm experiencing in comparison is minuscule to what they're experiencing. And I fight for them every single day, and I won't stop until Iran is free. And those are the kids that are going to change the country, and they're going to change the entire Middle East eventually with the support of the right people, and Iran will see freedom once again. Sure.
45 years under a repressive regime, censorship, education, brainwashing, people controlled. What has the young people done? How did they get their information to draw out and push away religious hatred towards Jews and Christians and want to see that there could be a new Iran? How did they get that?
So, it's very, very interesting because while we see a shift here in the West where people are supporting terrorism, people are, there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's happening across the country, the climate in Iran is extremely different. And the youth are very, very, very progressive, and they know that the source of their problems are coming from the Islamic Republic. They're not coming because of Israel. They're not coming because of America. The Islamic Republic has tried to condition everyone inside of Iran to believe that the problems are external and that you have to look outwards. But the people of Iran have begun to look inwards. And so a lot of the people of Iran, they don't hate Americans, they don't hate Israelis, they don't hate Jews. They're very open-minded and they're very progressive in that way. And I believe that comes from 4 decades of being told the problem is coming from the outside, and they've realized, no, the problem is coming from you. And they even chant that in the streets. They say, you know, our problem is not America, our problem comes from the Islamic Republic that's occupying Iran. And that's exactly what they say. And they realize that the conditioning that happens inside of the schools of Iran is not the truth. And you even see this from social media. The young kids of Iran that went out into the streets after the 2022 uprising, many of us went and we were for the first time able to be connected to these young people and see their TikTok, see their Instagram, see their YouTube videos. And I remember there was a young woman, her name was Serena, and I was listening to her YouTube videos, and she said, you know, I look and I see the kids in Los Angeles, I see the kids in New York, and I watch their lives and I don't understand why my life looks so different to theirs. And so for the very first time, because of social media, they're able to look at us and we are able to look at them. And I believe that that's bridged us together. Despite all of the censorship and the internet being inaccessible inside of Iran, they go to great lengths to talk to us. And I'm very active on Twitter. And so they come into Twitter spaces and they talk to us that are on the outside. And I remember we had, I believe it was when we passed the Massa Act through the House of Representatives. I remember the youth of Iran had woken up that night and we were on a Twitter space. Everyone was celebrating. Everyone was very, very happy. And I remember a young kid inside of Iran, and he said, Sarah, this is the first time we woke up to good news. This is the first time in a really, really long time that we're hearing good news. And so for the first time, we've been able to connect on a very, very deep level because of social media. And that's given both us a look into their lives and them a look into our lives. And that's helped combat all of the years and years and years and years of propaganda that have been perpetrated inside of Iran. Sure.
You have the army either join the revolution or stand aside. And how do you convince security forces in Iran not to repress protesters?
So that's a very interesting question. And what I would like to see would be defections. That would be best case scenario. Something about Iran that needs to be understood is that a lot of the clerical establishment and the security forces join the ranks because of monetary benefit. They don't do so because they're ideologically aligned, per se. There are some that are ideologically aligned, but for the majority, I would say at least, maybe not majority, but at least half are only in it for the benefits, because in the country there's a lack of opportunity, especially for the youth. They can go to college, they can excel, but there's no opportunity for them to have good jobs or to be who they want to be or do what they want to do in their careers unless they join the IRGC. It's basically like a military state that is occupying Iran with a theocratic veneer. So just to put it into perspective, what ideally we would see is defections and the IRGC defecting and not slaughtering the people when they go out to protest. What we saw in 2022 were, unarmed protesters were running at security forces, and it was something like out of a movie. I'd never seen it before, and I just remember thinking to myself, how is this even happening? I don't have the bravery. I almost don't even have the bravery to just speak out. How did these kids go out there empty-handed? And so eventually we will need to see mass defections in order to see an end to the brutality, and it's just a matter of getting there, to convince the people that are repressing the IRGC to stand down, not to slaughter the people of Iran, and to let them protest, which, will it happen? I'm not sure, but I know change is on the horizon.